Thank you for joining us for this Prairie Tales podcast. Our wagon train to the past is taking us to the prairie in 1871. We will be stopping for a few nights in Newton, Kansas, which at the time was called the wickedest part of hell. This episode is sponsored by Norm's Coffee Bar on the historic main street of Newton, Kansas. This friendly community cafe has room for everyone to enjoy, from kids to us old-timers. It's a great place to relax when you need a break from the dusty trail. A big shout-out goes to Tammy Lakey and her staff at Norm's Coffee Bar for their support of Prairie Tales.
Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. Newton, Kansas, 1871. It's not exactly the quiet farm town you might think of today.
No, definitely not. Think rough and tumble frontier town, loads of energy, and, well, according to the local papers, quite a bit of trouble brewing.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into today, specifically September 1871, using these amazing newspaper accounts put together by Darren McManus and the Harvey County Genealogical Society.
These aren't, dry historical summaries. They're like snapshots, really vivid, capturing life and sometimes death as it happened. Real murder and mayhem territory, as the newspapers kind of framed it.
Right. So we're looking at some pretty intense stuff. A really violent back and forth between a guy named Bill Dow and a woman, Lottie Foster.
Yeah, that one's something else.
Then there's a possible suicide attempt, this weird, dangerous prank maybe with poison.
And the big one, really, the shooting death of the assistant city marshal, Carlos King. Very grim.
So, our goal here, for you listening, is to get a real feel for what life was actually like on the Kansas prairie back then, through these raw, unfiltered contemporary reports.
Let's start with Bill Dow and Lottie Foster. This whole thing seems to kick off on Monday, September 18th, 1871.
Okay, so the Kansas Daily Commonwealth reports it. Bill Dow, who they say already had, quote, unenviable fame.
Doesn't sound good.
No. He apparently got into it with Lottie Foster, and the paper just says he beat her badly.
And they use that colorful phrase, right, about her eye.
Yeah, that he put a cap on one of her peepers, basically gave her a black eye.
So pretty brutal. But Lottie's reaction, well, it wasn't exactly passive.
Not at all. The report says she gets a revolver, goes out, and fires 5 shots at Dow while he's just walking away down the street.
5 shots. Did she hit him?
The 5th one did, hit him in the hip, described as a very severe wound. Though, interestingly, the paper at that point thought he'd probably survive.
Wow. Okay, so gunfire in the street over a fight. That tells you something about the place right there.
You'd think that might be the end of it, maybe some cooling off.
But nope, not in 1871 Newton, apparently.
Right. The very next day, the Daily Commonwealth runs another story. Headline, another murder at Newton.
Which is a bit much, wasn't it? He didn't actually die from this next bit either.
A definite overstatement. But this report gives us more on Dow, calls him a veteran gambler, saloon keeper, politician, and a sport. Quite the resume.
A sport.
Yeah.
So what happens next? He goes looking for Lottie.
He does. He visits her house. She's called an unfortunate girl this time, and he's got someone called Little Mike with him, another sport.
Okay, Dow and Little Mike and Lottie. What could go wrong?
Well, it starts almost strangely playful. Little Mike starts throwing watermelon rinds at Lottie.
Watermelon rinds.
Seriously. She gets mad, chases him with a stick but can't catch him. Then Di steps in.
To break it up.
Kind of. He grabs Lottie, apparently playfully, and calls out to Mike, "I've got her!" But this just sends Lottie into a rage.
So the playful move backfired.
Big time. She turns around, and she's got this heavy key in her hand.
A key?
Yeah, heavy key. And she just starts hitting Dow in the face with it. Multiple times. Gives him a nasty gash right below the eye.
Ow.
Ugh.
Okay, so Dow's probably not feeling playful anymore.
Definitely not. He throws her down, and the paper says he administered a sharp castigation.
Castigation. A beating, basically.
Pretty much. But then the cycle repeats. The second Lottie gets free.
Let me guess. Revolver again.
You got it. Goes inside, grabs another revolver, comes out, and fires 3 more shots at Dow.
Good grief.
Oh.
Does she hit him this time?
Yep. One bullet hits him in the thigh, the fleshy part glances off the bone.
Ouch. So he's been shot twice in 2 days by the same woman.
Correct. And despite this wound, he manages to walk to the railroad depot before he finally collapses and has to be carried home.
Unbelievable. And did he survive this one too?
Apparently so. A later report just says he was Doing well.
Doing well. It's just the casualness of it all is astounding. But what about, the law? Arrests, charges?
That's maybe the most telling part, the paper notes. No legal steps will probably be taken by Dow on account of his general unpopularity.
Wow. So basically, nobody liked him enough to bother prosecuting the woman who shot him twice.
Seems that way. It really suggests a different kind of justice, or maybe just a lack of it, depending on who you were. Your social standing mattered more than the actual crime, perhaps.
And the reporting style, like you said, so blunt. Matter of fact, about beatings and shootings, it gives you this raw, unfiltered feel for the time, doesn't it? What's considered normal, or at least newsworthy, but not necessarily shocking.
Definitely. Okay, so that's the Dow Foster saga. Intense stuff. But there were other unsettling things happening that same September, pointing to maybe different kinds of desperation.
Right, not just interpersonal violence. There was the incident with the German woman.
Yeah, the paper described her as a cigar vendor, about 40 years of age, and mentioned she used chloroform.
And the report, this was September 19th, said she tried to kill herself. Used ether on a handkerchief.
Oh, wow. Did she?
No, someone found her by chance. She was insensible and nearly dead, but they got medical help just in time and she recovered.
That's incredibly sad. It hints at maybe the isolation or hardship some people face there.
Yeah, the darker side beneath the sort of rough energy. And then there was another incident just a day later.
The one involving Irish Mag and Lizzie Smith?
Described as two inmates of the Alamo dance house.
Okay. What happened with them?
The report says that during a drunken frolic, they both took poison.
Took poison, like intentionally?
The paper doesn't really say why. It just frames it as part of a drunken frolic, which sounds odd, right, for taking poison.
Extremely odd, almost dismissive.
Exactly. It says they were resuscitated with difficulty and were in low condition but expected to recover. But no reason given. It just leaves you wondering about their lives, what was really going on for women in those dance halls.
Yeah, these quick reports, they almost raise more questions than they answer, but they definitely add to this picture of Newton as a place where life felt really precarious.
For sure. But then we get to the really big story from that month, the killing of Assistant City Marshal Carlos King.
Right. This feels like the grim centerpiece of that month's news. The first report is pretty brief, right? September 22nd.
Yeah, concise but chilling. Says there was a shooting at Rowdy Joe's dance house late Saturday night around 11:30 p.m.
And the outcome?
Assistant Marshal King, dead. And a grocery keeper, David Lyle, mortally wounded.
Oh, no. How did it supposedly start?
The initial version was that King tried to take a revolver from a Texan.
Always seems to involve Texans in these stories.
Well, yeah. And this Texan reportedly shot King. Then more shots were fired in the chaos, and Lyle got hit.
And Lyle was expected to die.
At that point, yes. The report said he was still alive Monday morning, but recovery wasn't expected. And it makes a point of saying King had only been on the job for a month.
Only a month. What a brutal welcome to law enforcement in Newton.
But then we get a much more detailed account. Someone writing under the name Allegro.
Allegro, right. I remember seeing that. He starts off talking about being away on a buffalo hunt. Really sets the scene.
It does. And Allegro gives the coroner's verdict. King died from a pistol wound inflicted by Thomas Edwards, feloniously and with intent to kill. So, murder.
Okay, so Allegro has a different narrative, or at least more detail. What happened leading up to it, according to him?
Well, earlier that evening, around 10 p.m., King found this Edwards guy in a dance house in Hyde Park.
Hyde Park? That sounds like maybe the rougher part of town.
Yeah, other accounts suggest it was exactly that. Edwards apparently resisted King. Then another officer, Constable Tom Carson, stepped in, told Edwards to drop his weapon.
Did he?
Surprisingly, yes. Edwards complied. And then they just let him go. King stayed in the area, though.
They let him go after resisting an officer while armed. Okay, so what happened next?
About 2 hours later, maybe around midnight or so, King is standing outside that same dance house area, a place that had seen violence just the month before, apparently.
And then Edwards comes back.
Edwards approaches him, gets close, pulls out a Derringer and shoots King point blank in the chest, near the heart.
Oh my God. A Derringer, so easily concealed.
Exactly. King stumbles back inside the dance house and asks, who shot me? Then he just collapses.
Heartbreaking. Did he die right there?
Pretty much immediately. Allegro describes a thick black stream of blood from his mouth. It's really graphic, brutal detail. Underscores the mayhem.
And Edwards.
Gone. Vanished. Lacey, that's what Allegro reports initially. No immediate arrests.
The reaction in the town must have been huge, killing a lawman.
Oh, absolutely. Allegro really emphasizes this, describes King as highly respected, no better gentleman nor truer friend. There was a strong feeling, it wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing, but maybe premeditated, plotted by others.
Plotted, so a conspiracy.
That was the suspicion floating around. The town was in a state of tremendous excitement and indignation. People were furious.
I can imagine. Did they trust the local law to handle it?
Apparently not entirely. Allegro specifically calls for detectives to be brought in from Topeka, says there was a perceived lack of sagacity locally. Basically, they didn't think the local guys were sharp enough to solve it.
Wow, that's quite a statement in the local paper.
It is. It shows the level of frustration. King's funeral was huge. Businesses closed. It was a major event.
And what about David Lyle, the grocery keeper, who was also shot? Did he make it?
Yes, there's a small update on him in Allegro's report. Turns out he was shot in the thigh, accidentally, during the commotion. And unlike the initial report, Allegro says Lyle was actually doing well.
Oh, that's something positive, I guess.
Yeah.
A small bit of good news in a terrible story.
Right. But the story of Carlos King, it doesn't actually end there in 1871. There are these later newspaper snippets that add, well, more layers.
Later snippets, like what?
Well, in 1876, there's a mention of a tombstone finally being made for him, confirming he was Carlos B. King, killed by a Texan while City Marshal.
Okay, just confirming the basic facts years later.
Right. And another report that same year says his father and brother came to move his body to the main city cemetery. Just sort of these sad personal follow-ups.
Yeah, reminders of the family's loss.
But then, in 1878, it gets, well, complicated.
Yeah.
And kind of dark. There were reports that King's widow, who'd moved back to Michigan, and a lawyer were actually arrested for perjury and trying to defraud the government.
Defraud the government? How?
They were apparently trying to claim a pension by saying King had died from wounds he got serving in the Army.
What? But everyone in Newton knew he was shot dead in a dance house row.
Exactly. It seems like this incredibly brazen attempt to, well, maybe capitalize on his death, or perhaps driven by desperation. The local record was crystal clear about how he died.
That's shocking, really. Trying to get an Army pension for a murder victim. Was anyone else involved?
The report mentions a local man, S.J. Bentley, was involved as a witness in the case against them, so it definitely had local connections and must have caused quite a stir.
Yeah, I bet. It adds this whole other layer of, I don't know, tragedy and maybe opportunism or corruption to the whole affair.
It really does. It shows the ripples spreading out years after the initial violence.
So when you take all these stories together, Dow and Foster's violent cycle, the desperation hinted at by the German woman and the dance hall girls, and then the shocking murder of Marshal King and its weird aftermath, what does this collage tell you about Newton in September 1871?
It paints this picture of a place just bursting with energy, but also incredibly volatile. Law and order were clearly still being established, maybe tenuously. Personal conflicts could explode into deadly violence incredibly fast.
Yeah, the speed of escalation is striking.
And life felt cheap sometimes, maybe. But also the community did react strongly to King's death, so there was a sense of outrage, a desire for justice, even if they didn't trust the local means to get it.
And the newspaper is capturing it all?
Yeah, the newspapers are fascinating themselves. Their style so blunt, sometimes almost casual about horrific events, yet also capable of conveying real community grief and anger. It gives you a powerful, if unsettling, window into what people valued, what shocked them, what they considered just Tuesday, you know.
Right. So for you, listening, trying to get a handle on this era quickly, these accounts are invaluable. They're not abstract history. They're these intense personal stories that really bring the murder and mayhem of the frontier to life.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought maybe for you to chew on. When you look at these glimpses from Newton in 1871, the violence, the struggles with law, the personal dramas playing out so publicly, do you see any echoes today? Obviously, things are vastly different, but do societies undergoing rapid change or dealing with establishing norms and order still face similar types of conflict? How do individual stories like Lottie Foster's or Carlos King's shape our understanding of a whole time and place then and now?
That's a really good question. What does it mean to live through times like that, and how do those individual moments of crisis define an era? Something definitely worth thinking about.